Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, April 5th, 2018. Hi again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani back inside our New York City studio. Of course, New York is the epicenter of the MMA world on this Thursday. UFC 223 just 2 days away in Brooklyn, just a few minutes from this very studio. So we have a lot to discuss and, of course, some breaking news, which we will get to in just a matter of seconds. First, let me introduce the panel. That is the man in the shirt, Jeff Wagenheim of ESPN. That is Danny Segura of MMAfighting.com. And, of course, that is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall of The Ringer and MMAfighting.com.
Breaking
all right,
news
guys.
Or breaking windows?
Both,
yes,
actually,
all right.
both. The original plan as of 2 hours ago was to talk about a lot of crazy things. Max Holloway accepting a fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov on just 6 days' notice, having to cut what we're told is a lot of weight, an extreme amount of weight. The Ferguson freak injury, the great card on Saturday, Joanna rose 2, all that and more. That was the original plan. However, the three of us just left Media Day at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and as we were driving away, I got word that there was an appearance by one Conor McGregor. Now, this was one of the storylines going in to Saturday. Will Conor McGregor show up at the fight to not only support his friend and training partner, Artem Lobov, who's competing on Saturday against Alex Caceres, but also maybe to be there because we're told he's going to be stripped of the title, and the two men fighting in the main event now, Max Holloway and Khabib Nurmagomedov, are related to him as far as storylines are concerned. Well, he did show up. I'm told he showed up yesterday or maybe very early this morning, and he showed up to the Barclays Center as things were wrapping up. Now, a lot of information has come out. Let me quickly run down that information for the folks at home, for those who haven't read our reports online. So what we're told is Conor and around 10 to 15 or so members of his team showed up at the Barclays Center. It's unclear how they entered the building, but they were certainly in the building, and the fighters had already left to return to the hotel, left via the vans that they were driving. There's multiple vans. Well, multiple videos have now come out that Conor McGregor and his team began to surround the vans, and one particular van, which had Khabib Nurmagomedov and his team sitting in, and also started to throw things at the vans. Very clear that chairs were thrown. And one particular passenger on the van, Michael Chiesa, who is competing on Saturday against Anthony Pettis, I'm told, did suffer a laceration, and I'm told right now is either on his way to a local hospital or already there, and it's unclear at this time whether or not he'll still be able to fight. I'm also told that there were several other fighters who are competing on Saturday night who are on that van who are, quote-unquote, shaken up by what transpired being in the midst of all of this. There are plenty of videos online. You can see them shot by fighters who are on the van or next to the van, and it's just a complete, it's a complete scene. It's chaotic, and then shortly thereafter, with security breaking it up, it's clear based off the videos that we saw that Conor and his team fled, and it's unclear at this time where they are. So that's the information as we know it right now. We do know that Dana White returned to the arena. He was there for the face-offs. Police came to the arena to talk to some of the fighters. The fighters were not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to go back to the hotel. But I'm told as of right now, everyone is gone. Everyone is back at the hotel. So the fighters are able to now start cutting weight and, go along with their day. It's very much a developing story. This is unique for this show. We don't get situations like this, and we're all digesting it right now with all of you. So these are our first reactions. It's very raw, and we're not going to make any grandiose claims here, but very important to talk about this because, as we've talked, Jeff, on this show in the past, this is another incident. Conor hasn't fought in a long time. He hasn't fought in MMA in over 500 days, but he's certainly been in the news. Of course, we remember what happened at Bellator late last year with him storming the cage and other situations. So immediately, your thoughts now as you're taking this all in. You've seen the footage. It's there. It's out there. You've heard the reports. You know about Chiesa. I know it's very raw, and I know we're all digesting it as we speak. But what are you thinking as you find out about all of this?
Utter stupidity. There's no reason for something like this to be going on. I realize that this is a sport that is beyond just, the physicality of one person fighting another person. There's a lot of mental warfare that goes on, stare downs, all that kind of stuff. That's all fair game. But this is just utter nonsense. As you said in the beginning of the show, we have Max Holloway taking a fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov on 6 days' notice, having to cut an incredible amount of weight. That is what the story of this weekend should be. There's a sporting event that's happening over in Brooklyn, and that's what we should be talking about. But instead, we have to talk about utter stupidity and some entitled athlete who just has made a tremendous amount of money and now believes that he runs the world. And we'll find out. We will now find out whether the UFC and the New York City Police Department agree with Conor McGregor that he runs the show.
And here's some more information. Dana White talking to MMA Junkie just seconds ago, and he said, quote, "What happened today was criminal, disgusting, and makes me sick. He has also removed Artem Lobov from the card." So Artem Lobov was seen in the videos as a part of this, and of course earlier this week involved in a bit of an incident with Khabib Nurmagomedov. So he has now been removed. He's obviously punished for this. As I said, very much developing, but Danny, your reaction to all of this?
It's crazy that you just mentioned Artem Lobov. You know, we've talked about how Conor McGregor has gotten Artem Lobov in the UFC, specifically on this card. Now he just got him off this card. And yeah, I mean, I agree with Dana's comments. You know, I'm not gonna lie, it's sometimes entertaining when there's a little altercation and stuff like that, but at what cost? I mean, obviously here we got a fighter, Michael Chiesa, that got cut. He's on his way to the hospital from what we know, or there. We don't know the situation, but there's you never know. What if he gets pulled from the card? I mean, this is the biggest fight of his life, fighting Anthony Pettis, and a huge opportunity for him, especially coming off an injury. And this is all just because Conor McGregor decided to show up and cause a scene. And then other fighters were shaking up. There's still a lot of stories developing, but fighters are being affected from his actions. And this is just ridiculous.
Some more news, this from Adam Hill of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He said that Dana White has told reporters who are in New York right now that a warrant has been issued for Conor McGregor's arrest by the NYPD, and that his plane is not allowed to leave New York. Wow. So he did fly in, as I said, hours ago. That's nuts, man. What Conor is facing at the moment.
It's a lot to process all at once, and it's crazy to be getting this news as we're going on the fly. But what it strikes me as, man, you were mentioning kind of there was an attention. We've talked about this card a million times. Yeah. There's a ton of attention, and you know what it didn't involve? It really didn't involve Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. To me, this strikes me as a kid, a spoiled kid who, you know, like a teacher's pet type thing, or a son who, you know, the stepson starts getting more love and he wants to, you know, he's going to act out. This is what it strikes me. The guy's going to try to steal the attention back. But man, what a horrible and stupid way to do it. If he hadn't had the Bellator, you know, run in with Goddard and some of these other actions, maybe it wouldn't strike me as ultimately too far out there. But given that, it's just that erratic behavior times 10 now, and you're like, what is this guy doing? Because there's ways to get attention, which he can do at any point. He could post anything on his Instagram and he gets as much attention as he needs. He can intercept attention in so many different ways. So to me, this was like a guy acting out, and we saw Lobov the other day in an altercation as well, and I feel like this is all compounded, and this was his way to do it, and it just strikes me as a spoiled child who just needs that spotlight. That's the way it strikes me initially.
I've also been told by multiple sources, and Dana White did confirm this to reporters, that one of the fighters who was on the bus and was, quote-unquote, shaken up by the entire incident was Rose Namajunas, who's the strawweight champion of the UFC, and it's unclear at this time if she'll be able to compete on Saturday night as well. So there's a massive trickle-down effect here, not just what's happening to the biggest star in the sport, in the history of the sport, but this is now directly affecting Lobov off the card, Chiesa cut at a local hospital, and Rose Namajunas shaken up after being a part of all of this.
Do you think that McGregor cares about any of that stuff? Maybe the Lobov. Maybe he doesn't like, but he has plenty of money to say, well, you're not going to get your pay for this, so I'll, you know, compensate you. But, you know, Rose is the champion in the strawweight division and is making her first title defense. And this was, you know, this is a big deal. This is a big fight. And as Chuck says, I mean, this is about the fighters. This is not about, you know, some clown who just comes along and decides that he wants to take all, you know, grab all the attention. It's you know, I don't know. I feel like I've said enough about it. I don't really want to give the guy any more attention. I want to keep my mouth shut until...
This is not us talking about title shots anymore. This is not us talking about, you know, meritocracies. This is, as Dana White said in an interview with MMAJunkie.com, that it is, quote, the most disgusting thing to happen in the history of the company. Obviously a very strong statement from Dana, but people have been injured.
It's cowardly. It's cowardly. You know what? No, you know what the proper punishment should be? It should be that Max Holloway steps aside and they make Conor McGregor get in the cage with Khabib on Saturday night, and then he'll get his punishment. That's what the punishment should be. But no pay. I mean, it's just a cowardly act, and you know, it doesn't really make any sense. I wish we were sitting here talking about Rose versus Joanna in in terms of how that fight is going to play out, not whether Rose is going to be able to compete because of what she had to deal with.
I mean, it's a horrible look, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a horrible look on a lot of levels, but it's a horrible look for a guy that I really believe has been losing a lot of shine over the last bit of 6 months or so, because we're talking about interim titles, and we're talking about him being stripped, and we're talking about all these things because he's not fighting. Well, this starts to take on a negative effect within his fan base and et cetera, right? Like, if you see any of his tweets, there's a million things on there like, defender vacate, that sort of thing the whole time. It's a bizarre circumstance because I feel like he was already having to face a new negative cloud that he's never had to face in his career, and now he's going to have to face that times 10, and that's a very strange thing to contemplate for a guy who started out red carpet in the UFC, roses at his feet, expensive whiskey in the back, and it's just one of those things that you have to. It's unbelievable that we're having this discussion about like a guy who started out on that terrain in the UFC and how he literally had the world, eating out of the palm of his hand, and now he's acting like this, and you got to wonder, man. And I have to wonder if he's on substances or something too. Like, these are the types of that's the kind of erratic behavior that you might see from people who are using something. You know what I mean?
This is some next level stuff.
I don't want to accuse anybody, but this is that kind of behavior is definitely.
Yeah, this is some next level stuff. The other incidents, that he's had, they kind of play a part in promotion and things like that. But this is just some other next level stuff. Brando Moreno had he was speaking on his Instagram, in Spanish, and he was pretty much recounting because he was in the other van and he was explaining what happened. And he said it was like 20 guys that charged the van, and according to him, they even attacked security, and they were throwing big metal barriers and aluminum trash cans. I mean, this is criminal stuff.
It's hooliganism. You know what I mean? But from the star of the show. It's
and we're talking about the biggest, not only the biggest athlete in MMA. We're talking about one of the biggest athletes in sports, and this behavior is completely
when we talk
unacceptable.
about people who rise to the top of the sport and get a lot of attention, and some of the things that befall them, and of course the first name that always comes to mind is John Jones, and some of the antisocial things that have happened. But not to make any excuses for that guy and some of the things he's done, but it seems like there's a lot of instances where he just is irresponsible and things just get out of control. But I can never recall something where there was an intentional thing where he of sound body and mind decided to go in and do something really stupid.
Incident was then
this is something it's a premeditated act of entitledness, and it's something that I don't know. I mean, it's baffling. We haven't seen this kind of thing in this sport yet, and it really doesn't belong there.
What a detriment to his own teammate too. Like, they always talk about the bond of their team and all this stuff, and maybe they were acting in concert with all the team. But you got a guy, man, who. If you're really being honest, the guy's about a 500 fighter. The reason he has a name, the reason he was in a Cub Swanson main event was because Artem Lobov is because of his association to Conor McGregor. And here he is in another big spot, with the chance to do something in Brooklyn, and now he's off the card. I mean, when you start to be a detriment to your own team, and I know that Lobov was probably part of this too, but when it becomes a detriment on that level to your own team, now you're dealing with the heart of the whole situation, you know what I mean? Because these guys, that's what are they putting themselves in position for? To be jackasses in the end? No. Right. They put themselves in position to have that pedestal that they've earned, you know what I mean? Yeah. So all in one fell swoop, they've taken that away. And it's just, to hear Dana White saying that, it really makes you wonder to what extent this will affect everything. I mean, what do they do with them? Yeah. Like, what are they going to do with them?
That is a fantastic question.
I mean, I think, a big discussion and part of this big storyline that we had in our reaction video, we talked about it. Is Conor McGregor getting stripped? And I was like, probably not. Yeah. Because Dana White hasn't really come out there and said it, except, at the press conference. And there's always been talk about that. But after this behavior, this is self-destructive. I mean, they have to strip him regardless, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel like that's probably one of the things that prompted something like, I don't know, like to what extent.
You saw his tweet
I saw
very
the tweet
early this morning where he said that you guys, in other words.
Used the C word that was not Connor.
YOU''LL, which I'm told is slang in Ireland. Usual, I think it's pronounced. But that obviously seemed to bother him. In fact, we noted yesterday that was the first time that I had heard Dana White actually say that Conor McGregor was getting stripped.
It was the
first time. Beating around the bush. I continue to believe that they were playing a game of chicken. If at some point Conor was going to come back between January and April when he decided that he was going to do this, that maybe they would, figure something out, or maybe do like a champion versus champion. But yesterday seemed to be the first time that he finally said this man is getting stripped come Saturday night, and maybe that set him off. Of course, I would imagine that what happened between Khabib and Artem also fired him up, because it did seem like Artem was being, cornered by. It seemed a little uneven, as maybe today was a little bit uneven as well. Now, one thing that I've noticed just from texts that I'm getting from friends of mine and just quickly reading on Twitter, I get a lot of, and this is not me saying it, but I do read it with my own eyes. He's so brilliant. There's no one better.
I see a lot of that too.
You see that.
Right.
This is Stone Cold Steve Austin. I see all the pictures and all that stuff. And it's amazing that people have this reaction. I mean, we're not talking like fight stuff now. We're talking criminal stuff now. This is serious stuff. We're talking about a guy who's injured. Does it amaze you that people continue to have this reaction? Or, when you're just a super fan of a guy, an athlete, you're going to back him until the end?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that people would have that perspective. Everything that he's done that's been before, the reaction is, well, that's going to just build the fight up. I mean, I think even, the initial reaction any of us might have had when we heard that he was at the arena and he was causing a scene was, oh, that's going to really generate some more buys for UFC 223. And of course, the guy who wins that main event, he's going to win the lottery, and McGregor's going to make is going to make him a rich man. So this is the narrative that carries forth because of what McGregor has become. And I don't doubt that that's correct, but I don't think it's going to actually play out that way. I think Dana White has come to realize that he's created a monster.
Do you think that Dana White believes, like in his mind, enough is enough? Like, do you really think that he is going to draw a line with Conor McGregor?
I do. I mean, Dana White has all of his, flaws. We've talked about that on the show many times. But at his heart, he is a fight fan. He's a guy who really cares about the fight game. That's part of the reason I'm sure why he's getting Zuffa boxing going, and he really cares about the fight game. And I think that this is so much outside of what the fight game is about. This is not what it's about. This is hooliganism, and it's not. It kind of colors the entirety of UFC right now. Not just UFC 223 happening this Saturday night. The entire organization. What are we going to see on the news tonight later on? We're going to see all these people talking about this, and the idea is not going to be one guy did this. It's going to be, oh, this is what happens with MMA. This is what that sport is all about.
We've talked a million times about, this is a critical year for the UFC in terms of a TV deal looming, right. And any kind of chaotic perception of the sport that's going to get out there, which this certainly will, I'm sure is not going to sit too well with him or anybody in the UFC. But it's just because it's their main guy, they're with their main money source and their wellspring. You're almost like, what a crazy thing to have to deal with. But I do believe him, honestly. I mean, he said things like, remember Nick Diaz back in the day? He wasn't the star that Conor is, but Nick Diaz, he was like, he just wanted to play the game a little bit. He was always on his nerves because he would just do these very rogue things, not show up for a press conference, whatever it is. Well, he's got this times 50 with Conor McGregor, and I feel like at some point, if the inmates are running the asylum, which for a long time Dana has been accused of letting Conor just walk all over him, I think that now he's putting his foot down, to be honest, and I don't know how you couldn't at this point. He's forced his hand. If
you're wondering, as I said at the beginning, how did they enter the building? Well, Dana White told MMAJunkie.com that members of the Mac Life, the website that Conor McGregor owns, who are credentialed media members and very nice individuals who probably should have used better judgment, let them into the building. And so you wonder what happens to that outlet, which is always a bit of a, an interesting one because of the fact that it's a Conor McGregor-owned media outlet. So at this point, we don't know much. What I'm being told is that or much more, I should say, because we do know a lot. What I'm being told that the impetus, or maybe the catalyst, was really what happened between Artem Lobov and Khabib Nurmagomedov a couple of days ago. That the team was very upset that Artem was being, cornered, and did not. I think he had one other teammate there with him, but it was very clear that he was being outnumbered. And in fact, you can hear on the videos members of Khabib's team sort of saying, like, we're going to get you back and things like that. So this has become, a very serious thing between two
never seen anything
volatile
like this.
camps.
Yeah,
It's it's kind of numbing, here we are 48 hours before maybe the best card of 2018, and it really has been somewhat of a slow year thus far. There are some exciting things on the horizon, and for all this to happen,
it's self-destructive, like Daddy said. I mean, it's one of those things that you watch and you think, hey man, you made your money, and now I don't know what strata he believes he's in now, and maybe he believes he's above the law, because I don't know why you would do that without contemplating consequences. He's already been in other weird things where people, have talked about, like, possible criminal behavior, and so I don't know what to say. Like, if he's self-destructive, you can't let him be promotionally destructive, and I feel like that's what he kind of done in this. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think it's not going to lessen the pay-per-view buys. I don't think anything like that. But it's certainly, who's going to be talking about the fights now? Like, what into this thing?
Well, I mean, how do you know it won't lessen the pay-per-view buys? Because what happens if Rose Namajunas can't fight? Then you lose your co-main event.
Well, that's right. Mike Chiesa too. Like,
and Mike Chiesa can't. What if he can't fight? And they already lost Lobov. So that potentially is 3 fights. That's right there. And there's also untold things that we know. What if this messes up? What if Khabib is so enraged or upset about this that his whole weight cut goes awry, and now he doesn't make 155? I mean, there's so many spillover possibilities that
Yeah, I think this is where Dana White draws the line. Like, there's one thing, getting into a little altercation here and there, and for promotion purposes, it sometimes helps. You got that footage, but this is just, again, criminal behavior. This is, like Dana White said, disgusting, and
see, man, I'm all for
complete blackout on the sport.
And I'm all for, like, the chaos belongs in the fight game to an extent, right? Like, it sells, but it's got to be manageable chaos. Like, it sounds kind of funny, but it's got to be the type of thing where you know your boundaries. You can get by with a lot more in the fight game. When I first saw you tweeting it, actually, I assumed that his faction showed up and confronted them, and I was like, ooh, that's good, that's cool, like, here we go. He's going to be there, first of all, which we didn't know for sure if he'd be in Brooklyn, and then all of a sudden he's kicking up a little ruckus, that's fine. And then I saw your threat continue, and I thought, okay, this is, it just went straight from, like, a humorous thing to something you're like, oh my God, what did he do? You know what I mean? And to me, that's it's so weird to have to contemplate your biggest star.
Do you believe, though, that the UFC will do something? Like, let's say they have a heart-to-heart tonight, and Conor says, oh, I'm sorry, I want to come back in May. Do you think that they're really going to punish him? This isn't the NBA, and Ron Artest running into a crowd, and you know what I mean? Like, who's policing who here? You know what I'm saying? So do you believe?
In that sense, it will for sure, because this is still a fight game, it's still a promotion, it's still all about money. However this shakes out, that fight now is bigger, right? Like, or it'll be big. It will certainly,
the Khabib-Conor fight.
This whole that fight just gets bigger, only in the sense because this is something, and I was already getting texts, just like you probably are, from all kinds of people outside of the MMA sphere, and that's why. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now you're going to have a ton more eyes on that particular matchup just because of this. That's just the way it is.
That's all true, but at what cost? It's good to create promotion. It's good to create, buzz. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of chaos to create that magic. I mean, the Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, trilogy or, rivalry wouldn't be as big without all those little altercations. But, I mean, this is criminal behavior. You're crossing the line. I think the UFC will draw the line here, and we'll probably
What is that line? What is the line that they're going to draw?
I mean, they're one of their champions fighting in the co-main event just got shaken up. Michael Chiesa got cut. I mean, you can't just.
I know all of that, but what do you think that they're going to do?
He's definitely getting stripped, and I think there's probably a suspension coming. Remember when John Jones got suspended for some time, and he wasn't able to fight for out of cage issues. I think this will definitely be the case.
Yeah, I wonder whether I guess the New York Commission would have something to say, even though this was not happening at the fights. It's still there's got to be some ramification there.
I mean, although I was talking to one of the producers of the show. He's not a U.S. citizen. I mean, to have criminal anything, it's just you don't know to what extent he's going to be in trouble through legal action. Yeah. So it's just. There's so much still that has to be determined, but I mean, he might be in hotter water than we realize. Here, sitting here talking about it like an hour after the fact. You know what I mean?
I feel like we have said this a lot over the past few years doing this show. Like, this is the craziest week covering MMA. Remember UFC 200? When you think about where things started, Easter Sunday, and here we are on Thursday.
So,
we haven't even gone to the weigh-ins yet. We don't even know if Max Holloway is going to make weight. We don't know if Khabib's going to make weight. We don't know if Joanna. Like, these are all people who've had question marks surrounding
if that
their
fight fell apart and Rose doesn't fight. I mean, this would be I saw Dave Doyle tweet something like, the 30 for 30 there needs to be a 30 for 30 about this fight week at some point down the line. I honestly think that would be.
That was before, and I think that was before what happened earlier today.
Now I'm like, it's solidified. I mean, you have so many different layers to this fight week now.
I see people also say like this. Anytime you're talking UFC 223, because of course every news show under the sun, it does shed a light on the fight itself, the promotion. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is a silly question to ask, but all this leads to, like, I asked Dana White this question at the press conference, of course, before all of this yesterday. Do you think that just typically when there's drama, when someone falls off and someone steps in, and there's what we just witnessed with Max Holloway, I typically feel like that leads to more pay-per-view buys, that leads to more buzz, more promotion, more more coverage. And this obviously is not a fight that's happening, but it keeps UFC 223 in the news. I really do feel if everything remains intact, Rose stays on the card, Khabib, I feel like this card is going to do way better now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's.
You're right.
And I think part of me is like upset that I'm even saying that or thinking that way.
That's just being realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this, not this exact thing before, but we've seen strange, the bottle tossing incident, things like that where it just feeds it, it just feeds it. That's obviously on a whole different plane, that's not the same thing, but it's just human curiosity, right? Like you see something you don't normally pay attention to, you might not buy the card, all of a sudden you want to buy it just because you see there's something going on with this.
And this just adds a bunch of more layers to the story. Like, how is Khabib going to be, how's he going to react to all of this? Is this going to, hurt his weight cut? If he does make weight, is he going to be concentrated, come fight night? And just the fact that Conor McGregor showed up and did what he did, it shows that he has his eyes on this fight. He has his eyes on Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Max Holloway. This is an important fight, and we all knew that. But the fact that Conor McGregor, because he sometimes usually dismisses certain things, it doesn't address certain things. But the fact that he acted the way he did, it brings magnitude of how important this fight is for the lightweight division. And again, I think it'll, unfortunately, I think it'll do well in pay-per-view. It's unfortunate that this incident had to go down, but I think it does help.
Okay, so again, if you're joining us late, we've run down everything that happened earlier today at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Conor McGregor and members of his team attacked the bus that had multiple fighters who are competing on Saturday night. UFC 223's card is, of course, at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Michael Chiesa did suffer a laceration on his face. Michael Chiesa is currently at a local hospital. It's unclear at this time whether or not he is going to be able to compete on Saturday against Anthony Pettis. Chairs and other objects were thrown at the van windows. Rose Namajunas, who's the strawweight champion, was quote-unquote shaken up. It's unclear what her status is for Saturday night. And it's clear based off of the videos that I've seen and people who I've talked to that they were targeting Khabib Nurmagomedov and his team. And of course, there's a long history there with Artem Lobov and Ali Abdelaziz, Khabib's manager. And all kinds of people related to this. This is one of the most bizarre stories in the history of the UFC. I think there's no doubt about that. And according to Dana White, he said that there's currently a warrant out for Conor McGregor's arrest, but I've been told that no police has talked to Conor at this time, and he has not been arrested at this time. So that's where things stand at 3:33 p.m. Eastern time. There is a lot to discuss. We could have done a whole show on everything, not related to this. We had a whole big show planned. So let's try to ice that for the moment, because I am confident that everyone out there knows what we know right now. We are not holding anything back. Yep. You literally know everything that we know and everything that the media knows. This is as developing a story as there can possibly be. So stick with us, and plenty more is to come. But let us talk about what we're facing on Saturday, if everything remains intact. Of course, Artem Lobov off the card, so we know that's not happening, but we weren't going to spend too much time on that fight, with all due respect. Anyway, on Saturday night, we went to bed thinking that Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov was finally going to happen. They booked it 4 times. We find out on Sunday, Ferguson's out, injured his knee severely while doing media at the Fox lot in LA. I mean, you can't, Dave Doyle is right. You can't script this wackiness. This is the wackiest thing. And then, to make it even wackier, they call upon Max Holloway, who a month ago was supposed to fight, suffered a severe ankle injury, pulled out of that Frankie Edgar fight, and now is taking this fight on 6 days' notice against the 25-0 Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's never lost a round, and he has to cut an ungodly amount of weight. I mean, again, it's hard to compartmentalize all of this, but when you first found out that Khabib was now fighting Max and not Tony Ferguson, I'm assuming, like everyone else, you thought this was an April Fool's joke?
I didn't, because I trusted. I forgot now where I got the news, but I just thought it was a source that I just didn't think would pull off a joke. But when I first heard it, I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" You know, I mean, it was definitely a moment of like, oh my God moment.
We've seen the stare downs. We've seen the face-offs now. They've now stared down or faced off twice since yesterday, of course. It still doesn't feel real to me. It still feels like this is like a video game situation. The featherweight champions fighting, you know, the uncrowned king at 155. I'm having a hard time coming to terms with it, especially because I know what's to come tomorrow, that this is not a foregone conclusion, right? I mean, like, he still has to make the weight.
Yes. And it's funny because, you know, this particular fight, it was sprung on us, right? It wasn't like that we've been pining for this fight. If we'd been flirting with it for a long time and we knew that it was going to happen, there would have been a very enriched feeling to this fight. You'd have been like, wow, this is crazy. You got Max Holloway is a big featherweight coming to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. He hasn't been taken down in years, which is the strength of Nurmagomedov. This would have been fascinating. I think the fact that it's just happening so fast, it feels cheapened on some level. I don't know. You can't get over that because you realize you're not getting the full experience with these two guys, and that part sucks. But the part that sucks worse, obviously, is that Ferguson, you know, we went through this, we went down the line knocking wood and crossing our fingers last week that we wouldn't have this kind of news, and talking about what a travesty it would be if something happened. We even talked about very specifically, does this fight happen? And like, you know, even though we were 1 week away, and we're all like, well, you know, it's going to take something cataclysmic to happen for it not to happen, because they would fight through injuries at this point because they would not want to back out of this fight. And then this happens, and you're just stuck. So I saw that news, and I'm just thinking, like, it's almost too impossible to believe. It's almost so unfortunate and cursed at this point that you can't really wrap your mind around how this keeps happening. And then when you get the details about how it happened, you're like, that's just ridiculous. It's like somebody's poking a voodoo doll or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you start to think. So that part sucks, but I wish we didn't have to be on this accelerated track. I still love this fight. I think this is an awesome fight. It's crazy because it's standing in, so you had to wrap your mind around the being disappointed one way, trying to get excited. It's like you're replacing your excitement, but it is there actually, because this fight's amazing. You know what I mean? This is an amazing fight, but it's happening on such a fast track that, and hopefully it happens, but it's happening so quickly that you feel like you're not able to process it properly.
Right.
For me, when I first heard the news, the first thing I did, I saw it from your tweet. The first thing I did is check if it was really you, because I know Chris Heidelberg had posted something on, you know, with the April Fools, there was a few jokes out there, but as soon as I realized it was real, I couldn't, you know, it was insane just to think that this fight's been booked 4 times and it still couldn't come to fruition. And then it really made me wonder, you know, we've talked about extensively here how that fight is one of the best bookings in lightweight history and one of the best bookings in MMA. And it's really unfortunate that we might not even ever get to see it. We're still, you know, Dana White says he's never going to book it again. We'll find out if that's true or not. But I mean, it definitely hurts, because is the UFC going to really try to book this a 5th time? It's difficult to know. But, you know, now that Max Holloway stepped in, at first I wasn't too fond of the idea because, you know, again, Max Holloway's injured. He gets really big in between camps, and we've seen that. How is he going to make the cut? There was so many asterisks, but historical moments in sports happen, you know, when there's turmoil, when there's chaos. And Max Holloway just feels like he belongs there. The way he's carrying himself all throughout fight week, it almost feels like he knows something that we don't. And I'm not saying he's going to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, because that's a difficult task, but just the possibility of him defeating him is worth tuning into the pay-per-view.
Well, the story was if he actually won the fight on Saturday, I mean, you can't script this any better for the UFC, because now he has the 2 belts that Conor was just stripped of. Right. But of course, now we don't know what Conor's status if he ever fights again. I'm sure, you know.
I know, it changes everything, right?
Yes, but it's so that's like another added layer to all of this. I have mixed emotions, because on the one hand, you know, I'm disappointed that we're not seeing Ferguson fight, right? You wanted to see what a great fight that was. It's been booked 4 times. On the other hand, great, Khabib still stays on the card, and he felt like the biggest draw, right? It's happening in Brooklyn, big Russian population, awesome. oh, great, they essentially made a super fight in 6 days. Like the featherweight champ who hasn't lost, I think, 12 fights, since 2013, he hasn't lost, he hasn't been taken down in 4 years. Awesome. But then I don't want to see, as you said, this fight on 6 days. I want to see a full camp. How's his ankle? How's the weight cut going to affect him? How's his cardio? So it's like, I can't give a specific feeling because it's just a lot. It's a lot there.
If Nurmagomedov goes out there and just bulldozes him, right? You're going to have that asterisk no matter what. Well, he had to fly all the way, so he had really 5 days notice because he was on the first day he was flying all the way out from Hawaii and all this stuff. He had to cut all the weight. He hadn't trained for it. I mean, you're going to have all of that, and even if it goes the other way, you're still going to have a lot of that because people forget that Nurmagomedov has to then wrap his mind around the idea of facing Max Holloway, who's a completely different beast than Tony Ferguson. So it's one of those fights that the guys are just too where they're at in this place and time. They're too big to cram into to an event. You know what I mean? And that's the part that's hard. You know what I mean? But I still love it. I love the fact that Holloway just doesn't hesitate because we've talked about this many times. He's a guy who has a lot to lose. I know that you'd mentioned somewhere like sort of because obviously he can go back to featherweight without losing that belt. But it's still a lot to lose. He has this winning streak and a lot of the mojo and stuff he's been creating over the last 4 years or whatever. That all is at stake for something that's just, going to happen like this.
It definitely adds to his legacy, right? It makes him a way more popular fighter.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I do think that there's a lot of win-win for him in the sense that even if he does lose the fight and get beat up, he has a sort of built-in, not excuse. I don't think he's a guy who's going to make excuses, but he didn't have time to really prepare. It's a double-edged sword here. We wanted to see Nurmagomedov stay on this card, and what do? On the one hand, you could give him a lower-ranked guy who just is there to essentially showcase Khabib, and that would be satisfying to some extent, but other people would be like, no, I want to see him against somebody who's going to threaten him. But now we're putting him in a fight with somebody who doesn't have time to prepare.
Yeah, and if you're going to have the belt in play, which was the big deal, you got to have somebody.
Well, it had to be. I went over when I was over at the press thing today. My main reason for going, I wasn't really interviewing people. I just wanted to get a sense of, take a look at him. I was watching a lot of his interviews and just seeing whether, and when I say him, I'm talking about Max, see how depleted he looks and see, and he just seemed pretty good. I mean, in a sense, it felt like
we'll see tomorrow morning.
And I wasn't sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing because he's not only cutting weight, but he's also trying to lose weight, and that's a double-edged thing as well. Obviously the serious cut isn't really is happening now, but presumably he had to do more than just cut in order to get down from where he was when he left Hawaii to get to New York. So
Dana White's immediate reaction is, I'm never booking Ferguson Khabib again. But what if they keep winning?
Yeah,
these stars are going to align.
Not to mention, he didn't have the knowledge he does of this whole Conor McGregor thing. I mean, that changes that dynamic too, because suddenly you're like, well, that's if McGregor was going to step in after this fight, right, and maybe face the winner, that probably doesn't happen now. I can't imagine how that happens now. Right. Maybe it does, but Ferguson's the obvious guy, right? Like, as long as he's healed and ready to fight.
Well, my question is then, do you go to that well? Like, I mean, how do you promote that fight? How do you get people to buy tickets in advance when it's not just a fight that has fallen through now 4 times? 3 out of those 4 times, if we exclude the very first one, the tough finale fight, all have been under pretty weird circumstances and all have been pretty darn close to the fight. In fact, you recall at 209, like we actually went through the weigh-ins, like Ferguson weighed in and Khabib didn't show up. It's not like these things just fall apart. It's always like weird things. And this time, it's Ferguson at an interview tripping over a cable and tearing up his knee. So how do you go to that well again? Is that possible? I threw out the idea on Monday. You almost make it a secret fight, and you do it at the Tough Gym, and you announce on Tuesday, these 2 guys have weighed in 24 hours, they're fighting on Fight Pass, sell it for $4.99. I feel like you make a killing. That's the only way.
Every convention and the fight game and the structure of this fight game. But, I mean, I could see why they would contemplate some crazy stuff like this.
What if you put it on a fight card with something else that's just
it can't be main event, right? It can't be main event.
Yeah, I mean, the co-main in this one was certainly an appealing fight, but I think you could up the ante even more.
Unless you have like a third guy. Well, didn't they do this one so they had somebody training in the wings?
Yeah.
What was that for?
But I mean, they essentially had that situation now. They had Jacare in New
that's
York.
what it was. That's the one I was thinking of. But I mean, as much as it seems ridiculous, I feel like let's just say Nurmagomedov goes through his, he wins this fight and he does it the same way, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away that Tony Ferguson is the guy to put him against. I mean, the bottom line is it will stay there until one of these guys loses, and they're both still where they are. So, as much as it's crazy to say, I think that they would have to look at it again.
Yeah, it would move if that plays out on Saturday night the way you describe, and if Khabib beats Max, that just moves Tony Ferguson one step higher on the list of all-time longest winning streaks for a UFC fighter. So it's if nothing else, it kind of just increases the gravitas of that fight.
At the end of the day, you have to book. If you're trying to resolve things for a title, you got to book the best against the best, right? Yeah. And Khabib said it. What happens if I keep winning, he keeps winning? Yeah. We have to meet at one point.
He also really was like, I really want to fight him still. Right. You know what I mean? So. He's lobbying for it. It already felt like Dana had come down off that never stance by the following day.
I know.
So it's just like I feel like they're already kind of looking at the inevitable if it ends up being that.
And call me crazy, but all these ridiculous circumstances that have gone down and have canceled the fight each time, 4 times now. I mean, it has to add to the story, right? Anticipation. This is a fight that's
story, but if you're in the local market.
Right,
you're not buying
it's hard to buy
$400 tickets.
That's why you can't make that the main event.
True,
the main attraction. This has to be on a New York card, like say one of those November ones where they have 3 top fights. Where if that falls out, they still have 2 top fights there that people are paying attention to.
I will say because, we've talked about this, but I'd be very guarded to be excited about that fight. I already was on this one up until this week, and then I realized how much I wanted it again. I was so disappointed to hit that news that I would be like almost cut off from it until I saw them walk into the cage this time.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, on this show, we were asked a couple of weeks ago what were the best fights that have never been made. To me, it's not even a question anymore because even Couture Fedor, Couture Lesnar, there was no story there. That was just like fantasy stuff. This time we've been now teased 4 times. All the press conferences, the stare downs, all this stuff just I think adds. We just want to see them in the cage together at this point, and it doesn't feel real until we get there. Now, what about Tony's injury? I mean, I'm not calling it into question, but in the history, there's the infamous Kevin Randleman, slipping on the pipe.
That's what I was trying to remember, yes.
That, in the history of sports, that has to be one of the strangest injuries for a top athlete. And when you consider the money at stake, not only in this fight, but if he won this fight and then gets to the Conor fight, and who knows if that all gets blown up now, I can't wrap my head around that one either. You tore your LCL while doing an interview and tripping over a cable. That's just madness.
I actually have to question Tony Ferguson as an athlete. I mean, I walk into this studio every single week and I step over. There's all these cables over here. If
it's true.
The cameras were turned around, they would see. And I never hurt one of my ligaments. It's I'm still intact. So Mr. Ferguson, come on.
Yeah, you'd be fighting on Saturday.
I would make it.
Called you.
Yeah, that's right. Me and Khabib.
Sounds like I mean, who knows to what extent he's serious, but it sounds like if it was up to him, he might have tried to fight.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you got to give him credit for that. I mean, but the bottom line is, given the injury and all that, you're like, dude, you want to see him in the best form you get him. I don't want to see some, dilapidated version of him stepping in there trying to fight that guy, against Nurmagomedov. Right. So it sucks, but it is inexplicable, and it's like if they book it again, like it would just be one of those things that you're just I don't know how it would be, because I felt like we exhausted every one of these little superstitious cliches during this one. We burnt them all up. So if they do a 5th one, I feel like it's just going to be we're in a whole different strata at that point.
One thing I'll say, go ahead, Danny.
And that just points out MMA is the craziest sport ever, because if you just look at this,
craziest to cover at least.
Imagine LeBron James getting that injury.
And this is not
wow.
And it was not an injury that like it happened during training or something like that. This could have happened to any athlete, like any athlete going to do an interview at a studio, but no, it happens to Tony Ferguson, an MMA guy. And how many times do people go to studios and do interviews? I mean, it's just insane.
Imagine LeBron James attacking the Toronto Raptors van as they're leaving the queue in Cleveland. That's what just happened a couple hours ago.
It all comes back, right?
Yes, it all comes back. I mean, it's still hard to come to terms with, to be honest.
The thing with Tony Ferguson, though, I was making light of it about the cable stuff, but the other day, listening to him on your show, right after you had I guess you had Khabib on first, and then you had him right after, and he just sounded so heartbroken, and
oh man, he didn't sound like himself.
No, I was surprised he even got on there.
You just think, this kind of stuff that happens is just so. It can be just so devastating for an athlete, a finely tuned athlete who did all the right things, and then, you know, just
And forget
happens to
about
step in the
greatness
wrong
sometimes.
place.
You're just like, the payday, man. I mean, the guy was going to sell millions, right? Like he said, I mean, he's a pay-per-view points, and it's a huge event.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of which, that's a great segue, and I know this may seem very inconsequential to the audience, but the audience needs to remember that as much as we may hate these interim titles, these interim titles are lottery tickets. You know, I was talking to someone online, Devin Sawa, I'll name drop him, who was saying that the only one being fooled, the actor, of course, the only one being fooled by these interim belts are the fighters. I would argue that they're the ones fooling all of us. They're the ones who are trying to beat the system and say, look, you know, we're not getting paid when we're not fighting for belts. Well, how do we get paid? Interim or not, we're still getting paid if we're fighting for a belt. So for Tony Ferguson, he's getting paid the same if he's fighting for an interim belt, if he is the interim champion, or if he's fighting for the real belt, or if he's the real champion. It doesn't matter. And now Dana White is taking that belt away from him. And there was a situation back in November where Robert Whittaker, they told us, wasn't healthy enough to fight Michael Bisping. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He's fighting GSP, but he's still the interim champion. And of course, we know what happened afterwards. Why didn't Whittaker get stripped, and why is Ferguson get stripped? Do you agree with the decision to strip Tony Ferguson when he, you know, couldn't fight on 6 days' notice, and of course what happened at Fox?
Look, we have had these conversations, and you are the one person who has kind of made me come around a little bit about interim championships, only because it allows these fighters to get paid. But you know, in terms of anything other than that, other than the paycheck, you know, they're just nonsense. And this is proof they're nonsense, because, you know, why did he have one? Why did it go away? Did he do anything to lose the belt? No, it just was convenient to give it one, and then it was convenient to not have one.
I don't understand though why they're taking away his belt, because the simplest way to do this, right, is like, okay, he was the interim champion. He's still the interim champion. He fell out of the fight. This is for the actual belt, because they want to put that back in play. He faces I mean, it's just, it's the simplest way to look at it is like, he's still the interim champion, you know, like, and now they unify the belts as soon as one is clearly made, you know what I mean?
Well, then he said yesterday that he's the #1 contender. Like, oh, we're not stripping it. He's still the #1 contender. Well, A, he doesn't get the perks of being interim champion, and B, well, then what does that make Conor? Conor's not the #1 contender in the lightweight division?
I have no idea.
I'm not buying that.
This is all confusing stuff, and the reason, I'm still trying to wrap my head around like what is going on. But I mean, this is just clearly how much devalued the belt is. There's no champion right now. It's just everyone trying to gun for that fight with Conor McGregor. I mean, at this point, you're just throwing belts around. And I'm not saying this is what happened, but it looks like, you know, it's just whatever the promotion did, whatever was just convenient for them. Why did they keep Robert Whittaker with the belt? Because GSP and Michael Bisping were fighting. Who knew we didn't know if Michael Bisping was going to retire right then and there. There was a bunch of questions. Yeah. We didn't even know if GSP was going to continue fighting. So if those two guys decided to retire, they would just promote, you know, Robert Whittaker to the undisputed champ. In this scenario, you got Max Holloway and you got Khabib, two very active fighters that are nowhere near the end of their careers that you know are going to keep on fighting. So you can just throw away that interim belt because you don't need it anymore.
But okay, let me offer this. A couple things. What if there's a draw on Saturday? There's no champion. What if Max Holloway misses weight?
Or Khabib misses weight.
Okay, I'm just saying Max in this case because it's the extreme. So he can't fight for the belt anymore, right? We saw this with, but then wins the fight, right? We saw that with Romero, right? So there's two situations where now there's no champion. So why not just keep the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that was the, you know, all the big mystery about, you know, how come he's not stripping Conor McGregor, you know, until the fight starts? I think that was kind of the thing behind it. Is like, well, if the fight doesn't happen, or if circumstances decree that there's no lightweight champion come out of this fight, then they've got their lightweight champion, and that would be, in a way, could you imagine if the weekend ends, the smoke clears, and Conor McGregor is still the lightweight champion?
that could very well happen. He could be the last man standing.
I was trying
or there
to
could
say,
be 3 belts.
I used to always say, like, the reason I hated interim. So, first of all, an interim title, like you said, makes complete sense for fighters. It's really only other people, like the fans and the media, who have to struggle with it. But you always wanted the sport to be as simplistic and as accessible as possible to new audience, right? So boxing was very difficult because there's so many belts. There was so much going on. You were like, who's the champ of what? You know, you couldn't keep track of these things. MMA, and especially UFC, was very clear. This is your champion. These are the contenders. That's how it worked for a long time. There weren't all these interim belts. Maybe there would be one in special circumstances. Imagine how difficult it is at this point in time to try to jump in and follow the sport as a casual fan. It's ridiculous. It's like opening up. You're trying to fix your computer. And there's just a bunch of wires all frazzled everywhere. You're like, I don't know, what am I looking at here?
Yeah.
Because we can't even make sense of what's going on in the lightweight division. But we've had other scenarios with with middleweight recently and et cetera, where you look at these divisions and you think these are way more complicated than they need to be. And I think the UFC used to care a lot about like making it as accessible to a new audience as it could, and I feel like somewhere along the way, and it's just really because of saving events. I think the more events they save by plugging holes, the more problems that goes on.
And also, if Max Holloway wins, then you have 2 divisions tied up, so you have that problem again. As cool as it would be, the 2 belts, you're still facing that.
It's like the small picture keeps killing the big picture. It's like they keep plugging one hole and then there's another spring up, 2 more spring up, 2 more.
I was just talking to Mark Ramundi about this, who is in New Orleans covering a different kind of circus, WrestleMania. And I was saying, look, I know when people don't like when we compare the 2, but here's one thing that wrestling has in its favor that the UFC and MMA, they can't play with these circumstances.
They throw chairs? Is that the?
Well, no. Let's say Brock Lesnar's fighting in the main event on Sunday at WrestleMania, and he severely injures his knee walking down the stairs today. God forbid, we hope that doesn't happen. This is just an example.
Knocking wood doesn't help, by the way.
Right, I know. he could still, and we've seen this before. He will still compete on Saturday. Like, they don't have to blow up the whole thing. They don't have to ruin future plans and super fights. They just change the script and they protect him. They don't. But in our sport, unfortunately, the UFC literally took a super fight that could have been a lucrative thing in Hawaii or Russia.
Super fight.
Yes, yeah. and gave it to us on 6 days' notice. Now, we've had a lot of bad news today.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of crazy things, and the story is still developing. But I have been able to confirm in the midst of all of this that Rose Namajunas has decided to stay on the card. So she will compete on Saturday, that she's okay, that she's feeling okay, and that she's decided to stay on the card. So let's quickly talk about that fight with just a few minutes left, because one thing that has really stood out for me is that Joanna's not trying to play mind games this time. She's not trying to get under her skin. Right. She's not trying to be too intense with the stare down. It's intense, but it's not like last time. Rose said to me yesterday that she thinks she may have humbled her. Karolina Kowalkiewicz told me today that she thinks that Joanna has been humbled and that, karma kind of bit her. Have you sensed that from Joanna as well?
Well, I would say that you could maybe interpret it that way, but I would interpret it slightly differently in the sense that Joanna has used her mental intimidation as one of her tools, just like her jab. It's like part of her toolbox, and that has been something that she has used in the same way. Like think about other fighters, like the Mike Tyson used to beat opponents before they even stepped in the ring. And I think to some extent, some of the women who have fought against Joanna have been somewhat defeated even before they stepped in the cage because they've been intimidated. Well, she had her chance to do that in November. It didn't work against Rose, and so it's kind of like, well, you tried that left jab in the first fight, and she didn't let you connect with one of them, so you got to try something different. So I sort of feel like, I don't know whether humbled. She may be humbled, but I'm looking at it as more like it's just a piece of strategy that is no longer useful against Rose Namajunas.
Role reversal, right? Like, because she already used that card. She was going to try to bully her and intimidate her beforehand. Well, then she loses, and you have to go through all that repercussion. And I feel like a lot of the exaltation of Rose's win was because of that. It was because of that lead up. There was all this psychological warfare going on.
She said she was mentally weak. Remember?
Exactly. And then you're like, Rose gives this great speech at the end, and you're thinking, wow, she couldn't have come out of that looking better, smelling like a rose. But
well done. Well done.
But now you have a champion who was 14-0 going in that fight, who's now has the scrutiny of her own mental makeup. How does she come back? And it's like it's a role reversal, and it's really weird. And once again, Rose is sort of handling the situation. Like, I feel like she's just kind of like, because I thought her whole demeanor before that last fight was fascinating, and this time she's been, the same thing. She's found some center, in herself to handle these situations. The thing that everybody was wondering about, and now we get to see what Joanna does to come back from that kind of setback. You know what I mean? People react differently after being knocked out or being humiliated or whatever you want to say on a big stage like that. So now it's up to her to show what she's got.
I think it's a combination of both things. As far as like, I do believe in a way Rose humbled her and kind of made her realize, because she was undefeated, she had this aura that she was invincible and she was gonna break Ronda Rousey's record and then go on and win a second title, and then she realized, oh whoa, I can get knocked out, I can lose. So I think there's definitely something to that. But as Jeff said, You know, Rose has always been a brilliant fighter. The way she carries herself, the way she gets into her opponent's heads, and she couldn't do that. She couldn't crack Rose. She couldn't do that in this fight. And at this point, doing media, carrying yourself a certain way, it's exhausting. You know, so for her to try to get under her skin and invest that much energy into something that's not gonna work, it's just dumb. It's just foolish. So I think she understands that, and she's stepping off the gas a little bit.
And I got to say, I am so excited for that fight. I mean, I think that even with the way this card was originally constructed, with the fight, the main event that fell apart, even when that was still together, this was like a close second for me. It was really tight. I mean, as much as I was looking forward to that one, this is one that I think is so good. Exactly because of that, because of the mental part of it, because both fighters, you know, they've got physical tools and they've got this sort of mental game that they both have to sort of suss out.
And I think when the first time they fought, it was a very short fight. We didn't really get to see what that fight would look like. And Rose has a very high work rate, and so does Joanna. So this is a very exciting fight. And I was just talking to fighters at the media day. Anthony Pettis says this is his favorite fight on the card, and this is the one he's got his eye on. Same thing with Michael Chiesa.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic fight, and I think we don't realize how good of a matchup is because we saw the first one and we go, oh, you know, that was just quick. But I think this could potentially be fight of the night.
Is there anything more fascinating than watching, you know, the scene at the press conference yesterday, and what a great scene it was? I mean, they picked the perfect venue. It felt like we were in the midst of a mosh pit, people packed to the rafters, and you know, Khabib and Holloway going back and forth, and just watching Rose sit there, expressionless, stoic, just looking off into the distance. It's amazing. Yeah, like how do you, you know, she's unflappable. She's, you know, the female, that's Fedor's thing, right? I mean, you just can't get under her skin. Here's one more update, courtesy of our own Mark Ramundi. He said, just spoke to a spokesman for the NYPD. There's no warrant out for Conor McGregor's arrest at this time. He said, they are, though, looking for him and want to speak with him. The spokesman said, no one has filed charges against McGregor at this moment. So that confirms what I said earlier about no one reaching out to Conor, but they do want to speak with him. That's from our own Mark Ramundi. So what are we going to do now? Well, if you're watching us on Twitter, stick right there. After the beat is coming up, we're going to answer some of your questions. It's going to be a bit different this time, so stay tuned for that. If you're watching us on MMAfighting.com or Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else, wherever else this show is presented, go to Twitter right now, live.twitter.com/MMA Fighting. It has been an unbelievable day, truly an unbelievable day in the world of MMA, and something tells me that there is more to come. So we're going to answer some of your questions for the next 30 minutes over on Twitter. Go there right now, live.twitter.com/MMA Fighting. We call it After the Beat, and it starts right now.